Okay, so this is a 25 question quiz, so it's not going to be as in depth as our previous exam. Um, Obviously this review will be a little bit shorter because we're only going over in a sense 2 weeks. We're going to cover the media, the Electoral College, World War II, which involves the Cold War. Let me go ahead and get rid of that because this isn't the best year's chapter. This is still part of the Cold War. So this is the stuff we're going to be going over. And it shouldn't take us that long. And after that, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and let me know. So let's take a look. Okay, so one of the things we talked about, the media has a profound influence on our political system. And, policy issues that get a lot of attention and the issues that get a lot of coverage are the ones that, that are allowed by the newsmakers to kind of pass through. So, salacious stuff, sensationalized stuff, those are the ones that are going to get the most media attention. Obviously, things about voters is going to get a lot of media attention and so on. Now, when we talk about the socialization that media does, remember the socialization in the media and their responsibility is to kind of instruct us on how to feel about what the preferences the elites have along with their values, right? So they influence us that way. And, when you think about the media's functions, their functions are definitely to socialize us, again, trying to make us feel a certain way, interpret things to give us ways to understand certain stories. And probably the most important is they set the agenda. And what I mean by that is sometimes they decide what is newsworthy and what isn't. What is going to be on front page of the news, or actually, I was going to say newspaper, but we don't really have too many of those anymore. What are on the front page of a website? What's on the homepage? Things like that. So the media giants, whoever owns the media corporations or conglomerates, will decide what's newsworthy and what's not, and that's agenda setting. We tend to like sensationalized news, especially things that might happen that could gauge the morality of a candidate. Sensationalist news is a problem because at times it'll obscure other issues, it'll hide other issues and maybe make them seem that they're not as important. And, when we talk about sex coverage and sex scandals, sometimes people like to know about the personal lives of candidates because it might be a reflection of their moral character. And I think that's something that's really important to some people still. Looking back in the 2016 election, credibility and maybe somebody's private marriage and life, really came to light, but it seemed to not affect how people felt about each of the candidates. How should we protect military secrets? The best thing is to keep them out of the hands of the press and to keep military secrets secret. Simple as that. What is the Sullivan Rule? The Sullivan Rule is a kind of a thing that is put into place that comes from a court case called New York Times versus Sullivan, where the media it's easier for them to defend themselves because the standard of proof of whether or not a piece of news is libelous or slander, the standard of proof is going to be on the plaintiff or the people that are bringing the case. So say, for instance, you say something about me in the press and it's not true. I have to prove as a public figure that this libelous or slanderous statement has caused irreparable harm to my reputation. And that's something that's very, very hard to accomplish. It's a very high burden of proof to be able to sustain and be able to get understood by maybe a jury. How did somebody's libelous slander statements might have affected your reputation? So it's New York Times versus Sullivan. It makes it easier for information that is false to be, stated about politicians. And people can pretty much say what they want. And one thing that's really important in this chapter is the main link between the candidate and the voter is now the media, and it's more specifically social media. And what do I mean by this? The media acts kind of as a conduit between the citizen and the candidate now. Before it used to be the political party, but now it's the candidate. Okay, let's talk about the Electoral College. Know how many votes are allocated through the Electoral College? One easy way is 538.com. 538.com is a website that you can go on and look at an Electoral College map, and consequently, that's the number of votes that are eligible for the Electoral College. You have to win 270 in order to become president. The only problem with the 538 number is it is an even number. And potentially with that number, there could be ties, even though it's very, very unlikely. It could be a tie, right? Because we could have a 269 to 269 situation. The chances of that happening are infinitesimal, but it's possible. It's not probable, it's possible. And know that our Electoral College votes are allocated based off of the numbers of House of Representatives in our state plus 2. So simple as that. And Maine and Nebraska are going to be a little bit different because they are unicameral houses. So the state winner whoever wins the popular vote in the state wins 2 electors, and the winner of each subsequent congressional district will win 1. So if you look on the map, on the 538 website, or there's also another website called 270 to win, you can look and see how Maine and Nebraska's Electoral College votes are kind of doled out. Know what a faithless elector is. A faithless elector is somebody that votes, who is nominated as an elector, and then they vote outside of what the popular vote went in a state. So say, for instance, in California, say I was an elector in 2020, and Joe Biden won the Electoral College in 2020. Here in California, won all 55 Electoral College votes. If I would have voted for Donald Trump, I would be considered a faithless elector. So electors are dominated by the parties, and they specifically are chosen to be kind of loyal to the party. So it's rare that a person will deviate from that. And it is more common that they'll go along with what the party wants them to vote. So if the Democratic candidate wins California, they're going to receive all 55 Electoral College votes. And it's really, really rare for somebody to kind of deviate from that. If we talk about the closest Electoral College result in recent history, obviously that's going to be Bush versus Gore. That was the court case that we saw with regards to the 2000 presidential election, where Bush beat Gore by 594 votes in Florida, and he won the Electoral College by 5 votes. And consequently, on the other side, if we look at the biggest landslide in the past 40 years, it was Reagan versus Mondale. Okay, if we talk a little bit about World War II, the Cold War originated after World War II. We talked about the Ludlow Amendment. The Ludlow Amendment was an attempt to maybe have some type of referenda for a vote in case we would need to go to war. Instead of Congress deciding who would go to war, we would have to vote on it. And you all had a lot of really, really good responses on the discussion assignment on that. And remember, during that time, isolationism existed here in the United States, and 94% of the population wanted to stay out of the war. But once we had the attack on Pearl Harbor, that kind of changed things. Remember, Pearl Harbor, some of the things that led up to Pearl Harbor were tensions between the Japanese and the United States. The Dutch cut off oil supplies to the Japanese, which even made them more angrier. and in the sense that it led to tensions that led to a war. And remember that Ludlow Agreement was used to create a referendum for us where we would go out and vote. Know what FDR's Lend-Lease, or actually just know the Battle of Normandy, including Omaha Beach. It was a deadly battle in the war, but it turned the tide where the United States pushed the Germans out of France and back into Germany. Know what FDR's Lend-Lease program is, just generalities. How FDR lent billions of dollars to the Allies and kind of put the United States on the side of the Allies. Know the numbers of enlisted personnel and drafted personnel. Remember, we had about 60% of, or 62% of the people were drafted into the military during World War II, and about 38% were volunteers. So it's something to understand. And kind of when we look at the Vietnam War, we'll look into a little bit more detail about kind of how that whole view toward the Vietnam War draft changed. The Holocaust and the discovery of these camps. There were some events, some documents that were found in 1942 that stated that the League of Nations, which eventually became the United Nations, were aware of these camps. The official story is the United Nations was not aware of these Holocaust camps until 1944, but there's documentation out there that they might have known all the way back to 1942, which kind of creates another moral, maybe what took them so long to kind of maybe act on this. So it's just, again, a matter of perspective. The Battle of Iwo Jima, the Battle of Guadalcanal, these were two battles that happened in the Pacific theater. And what the significance is that these also kind of turned the tide. These were very, very deadly battles. My grandfather fought at the Battle of Iwo Jima, so it's something that I've looked at. A lot of people didn't make it on both sides. So just kind of the incidents that happened along with that. Don't worry about the events with the USS Panay. It was one of the parts that we talked about with the Japanese, what kind of, the sinking of the USS Panay in international waters. So don't get too caught up on that. We're not going to really address that on the midterm. On the quiz. And Hitler and his path to power. Remember, his path to power was to take over most of Europe. And he was on his way to doing that until he tried to overtake the Soviet Union, breaking a pact that they had, and the Soviets fought back. The Cold War, started right after World War II, and it didn't end until, I would say, until the 1980s when the Soviet Union fell. A couple of things. Know the Truman Doctrine, which, is kind of the belief that we need to protect countries against communist aggression, and it would be the United States' responsibility to do that. Know Truman's Fair Deal as well, just the generalities. You don't need to know everything about it. It was basically domestic policies to increase the minimum wage, to have people be able to get health care, guaranteed equal rights. Know what the Marshall Plan is. General George C. Marshall. It was a plan to kind of rehabilitate economies of 17 countries in Europe to help them create stability and to kind of recover from the war. The McCarran Internal Security Act, which was an act to try to weed out communists and people that were sympathetic to communists. Don't worry about Alger Hiss. It's one of the stories that came out of kind of the Cold War and what we call it the Red Scare, where people were being branded as communists, and that kind of really affected their careers. I know we talked in the chapter, we kind of referred to a little bit of the Alger Hiss story, as well as the Rosenbergs, and these were people who were accused of being spies for the Soviet Union. They were executed. Not Alger Hiss, the Rosenberg were executed. Alger lived a long life, actually. Korean War, causes where we're trying to stop domino theory, trying to stop countries from falling to communism. It was only about a 3 or so year war. And the reason I have MASH on there, MASH was an old TV show that lasted longer than the war itself. I think it was on TV for 10 years and the war was only 3. Joe McCarthy, lastly, was a person that was out trying to out people who were communist, who he believed to be communist. A lot of people lost their jobs and lost money, and there's really no proof. So kind of an assassination of people's characters. Okie dokie. That's what I have. I told you it'd be short. Do y'all have any questions in here? Questions, concerns, or comments?
No, not right now.
Sound good? Everything sound good?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so we'll go ahead and cut it off here. And then if you have any questions between now and the time you take the exam, let me know. Give me a few minutes and I'll upload this to our class and you should be able to take a look at it if you need to watch it again. All right?
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
see you guys
you.
later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.